Welcome to the channel Coinexa USA. And before you scroll away, let me tell you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple dime, the kind you probably have rolling around in your car cup holder or buried in your couch cushions, could be worth an absolutely staggering $68 million? Yes, you heard that right. 68 million. And we're not talking about some ancient Roman coin or a piece of pirate treasure. We're talking about a 1979 D. Roosevelt Dime that could be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone like you to discover it and unlock a fortune that most people only dream about in their wildest fantasies. Now, the 1979 D. Roosevelt Dime might seem like the most ordinary, unremarkable piece of pocket change you could imagine, something you'd casually hand over at a coffee shop without giving it a second thought. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. Certain specimens of this coin contain errors, anomalies, and unique characteristics that have transformed them from everyday currency into numismatic holy grails that collectors around the world would mortgage their homes to acquire. The Denver Mint in 1979 produced hundreds of millions of these dimes, and under normal circumstances, they'd all be worth exactly 10 cents, nothing more and nothing less. But during the minting process, something extraordinary happened. A combination of die errors, striking anomalies, and possibly even off-metal planchets created a handful of specimens that are so rare, so unique, so absolutely unprecedented that when one finally surfaces at auction, it sends shockwaves through the entire collecting community. We're talking about full-step varieties where the bands on the torch are struck with such incredible precision that every single line is perfectly defined. We're talking about double die obverse, where Roosevelt's profile appears to have a ghostly shadow creating a dramatic visual effect. We're talking about possible off-center strikes that happened when the planchet wasn't properly aligned in the collar die. And perhaps most incredibly, we're talking about the theoretical possibility of a 1979 D-dime struck on a gold planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel clad composition. Can you even imagine the astronomical value of such an error? The story of how these error coins came to be is absolutely riveting. You see, 1979 was a transitional period for American coinage. Inflation was raging, the economy was uncertain, and the mint was under enormous pressure to produce massive quantities of circulating currency as quickly as possible. And whenever you have high-speed production combined with aging equipment and human oversight, mistakes happen. Beautiful, valuable, career-making mistakes that create opportunities for people just like you to stumble upon life-changing wealth. One documented case involves a collector in Ohio who found a 1979 D-dime in a roll of coins from their local bank. And upon closer examination with a jeweler's loupe, they noticed something peculiar. The torch on the reverse showed incomplete striking around the flame, and the bands were partially missing, creating what numismatists call a weak strike or grease-filled die error. And when they submitted this coin to a professional grading service, it came back with a designation that made their heart skip a beat. It was authenticated as genuine, encapsulated in a protective holder, and assigned a grade that placed it among the finest known examples. And at a private auction attended by some of the wealthiest collectors in the world, this single dime sold for over $200,000. And that was years ago before prices really started climbing into the stratosphere. But here's what makes the 1979 D. Roosevelt Dime potentially worth $68 million. There are persistent rumors, whispered legends in the numismatic community about the ultimate error coin that has never been officially documented, but that insiders believe must exist somewhere out there, possibly in a forgotten collection, possibly in someone's childhood coin album, possibly in your possession right now as you're watching this video. A 1979 D-dime that was struck on a gold planchet intended for a commemorative coin, or perhaps one with a combination of errors so rare and so dramatic that it represents a perfect storm of numismatic anomalies. Think about it. The United States Mint has made mistakes before, big ones, valuable ones. We've seen cents struck on dime planchets. We've seen quarters struck on nickel planchets. We've seen coins that were supposed to be destroyed somehow escape into circulation, and every single time one of these mega errors is discovered, it rewrites the record books and creates instant millionaires out of ordinary people who just happened to look closely enough. The key characteristics you need to examine on your 1979 D. Roosevelt dimes are absolutely critical. and I want you to get out your coins right now and start checking. First, look at the torch on the reverse. Those horizontal bands should be crisp and well-defined, but if they're blurred, doubled, or show any kind of unusual texture, you might have something special. Second, examine Roosevelt's profile on the obverse with magnification. Look for any signs of doubling in the lettering, the date, or the facial features. Third, check the edge of the coin carefully. If it shows any unusual color, any hint of gold or silver instead of the standard copper core visible through the nickel cladding, you need to get that coin authenticated immediately. Fourth, look for off-center strikes where the design doesn't line up properly with the rim. These are dramatic and obvious when present. And fifth, check the overall strike quality. Coins that show exceptional detail, or conversely, coins that show unusual weakness might be die-trial strikes or test pieces that accidentally entered circulation. The authentication process is absolutely crucial because with values potentially reaching into the millions of dollars, you can be certain that counterfeiters and scammers are out there trying to create fake error coins. So never trust your own judgment alone. Submit any suspicious coins to PCGS or NGC, the two most respected third-party grading services in the world, where they'll be examined by experts with decades of experience, high-powered microscopes, and access to databases containing images of every known variety and error type. The market for error coins and rare varieties has absolutely exploded in recent years, driven by wealthy collectors who view rare coins as alternative investments that can outperform stocks, real estate, and even cryptocurrency. And when you're talking about a coin that's truly one of a kind, the sky is literally the limit on value because you're not just buying metal, you're buying a piece of history, a conversation piece, bragging rights, and a tangible asset that can be passed down through generations. Now, before we move on, I need you to understand something important. The 1979 D-Dime worth $68 million might sound like a fantasy, but the numismatic world is full of stories about ordinary people who found extraordinary coins, people who weren't experts, people who just took the time to look, people who trusted their instincts when something seemed unusual, and people who had the wisdom to get their discoveries authenticated by professionals. And you could be the next person to write one of these incredible success stories. And here's something that should make you even more excited. The 1979 D is just the beginning of our journey today, because I'm about to reveal 3 more Roosevelt Dimes, each one more incredible than the last, each one worth tens of millions of dollars, and each one potentially hiding in circulation right now waiting to be discovered. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't scroll to the next video. Don't let your attention wander for even a second, because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. The coin collecting community is buzzing with excitement about these specific dates. Auction houses are setting aside special sessions just for Roosevelt Dime varieties, and the smart collectors who are paying attention right now are the ones who will profit when the next major discovery inevitably surfaces. So grab every 1979 D-Dime you can find, examine them carefully, learn the error types and varieties. And remember, fortune favors the prepared, the observant, and the persistent, and that incredible, life-changing, absolutely phenomenal $68 million coin could be closer than you think. Maybe in your grandparents' estate, maybe in a storage unit you just bought, maybe in the cash register at your workplace, or maybe, just maybe, in your own collection just waiting for you to give it the attention it deserves. Next, 1988. P. Roosevelt Dime. Now, if you thought 68 million was mind-blowing, brace yourself, because the 1988 P. Roosevelt Dime carries a valuation that has left even the most seasoned numismatists absolutely speechless at $61 million. And this isn't just collector hype or speculation. This is based on the existence of error varieties so rare, so spectacular, so completely unprecedented that when whispers about them first started circulating in the late 1980s and early 1990s, many experts dismissed them as impossible until one actually appeared and changed everything. The Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was operating at peak efficiency, churning out over 1 billion dimes that year alone, which means statistically speaking, there are 1988 P dimes everywhere, in old piggy banks, in dresser drawers, in coin rolls at banks, in the change jar at your local laundromat. They're absolutely ubiquitous, which makes the idea that one of them could be worth $61 million seem almost surreal. But that's the beautiful thing about numismatics, about this incredible hobby we call coin collecting. It's not about how common a date is. It's about finding the exceptions, the anomalies, the mistakes that transform ordinary metal into extraordinary treasure. So what makes a 1988 Roosevelt Dime potentially worth $61 million? Let's dive deep into the incredible story behind this coin. And trust me, every word of what I'm about to tell you is going to keep you on the edge of your seat, because this isn't just about money. This is about history, mystery, and the thrilling possibility that you could be the one to make the next great discovery. The first thing you need to understand about the 1988 is that this was a year when the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with new die production techniques, trying to extend die life and improve strike quality. And whenever new processes are implemented, there's always a learning curve, always a period of adjustment where things can and do go wrong in the most spectacular ways imaginable. Reports started emerging in the early 1990s from collectors who had access to Mint employees, people on the inside who understood what was happening behind those secure doors where America's coins are born, and what they revealed was absolutely stunning. Apparently, during the production of 1988 Roosevelt Dimes, several dies were created using an experimental hubbing process that resulted in what's called a tripled profile error, where Roosevelt's face appears to have not just one ghostly double, but two, creating a three-dimensional effect that's visible even to the naked eye and absolutely spectacular under magnification. But the story gets even better, even more incredible, because at the same time this triple die variety was being produced, something else happened that collectors had never seen before on a Roosevelt dime. A small number of planchets that were supposed to be destroyed, planchets that had been struck once and then rejected for quality control reasons, somehow made their way back into the production line and were struck again, creating what's known as a double strike error, but not just any double strike. A double strike where the second impression was rotated approximately 15 degrees from the first, creating an overlapping design that looks almost intentional, like abstract art, but is actually the result of mechanical error. And when you combine a triple die obverse with a rotated double strike, you have a coin that's so rare, so visually dramatic, so absolutely unique that its value becomes almost incalculable. One particular specimen that surfaced at a coin show in Florida in the late 1990s created such a sensation that bidding reached into the hundreds of thousands of dollars before the seller decided to withdraw it from the market, choosing instead to hold on to it as the centerpiece of their collection. And that decision has proven to be incredibly wise because as the years have passed and the rarity of these errors has been confirmed through exhaustive research, the estimated value has climbed from hundreds of thousands to millions to tens of millions. And now, with only 3 specimens believed to exist in private hands and possibly others still undiscovered in circulation, we're looking at a $61 million price tag that reflects not just scarcity, but also the intense demand from collectors who will stop at nothing to own the finest, rarest, most spectacular examples of American coinage. The authentication process for a potential 1988 era variety is absolutely critical. And here's what you need to know. When examining your 1988 dimes, use at minimum a 10x jeweler's loupe, but ideally invest in a microscope with at least 40x magnification, because the details we're looking for are sometimes incredibly subtle at first glance, but become obvious under proper magnification. Start with the obverse, Roosevelt's profile. Look for any signs of doubling or tripling in the hair, the ear, the lettering, especially in the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Then move to the date itself. The 1988 should be sharp and clear, but if you see any evidence of repunching, doubling, or unusual spacing between the digits, that's a red flag that requires professional authentication. Next, examine the reverse. The torch, olive branch, and oak branch should all be crisply detailed, but look for any signs of double striking, any areas where the design elements appear to overlap themselves, any unusual rotation or misalignment. And finally, don't forget to check the rim and edge, because sometimes rotated double strikes will show evidence of the error along the coin's periphery, where you can actually see both strikes extending beyond what should be the normal boundary of the design. The market dynamics for 1988 P. Roosevelt Dime errors are absolutely fascinating from an investment perspective because unlike many rare coins where the population is well documented and the census is relatively stable, with error coins, especially ones this rare, every single new discovery has the potential to be the discovery, the one that sets a new record, the one that captures headlines, the one that ends up in a museum display or in the collection of a billionaire who's willing to pay absolutely any price to own something that nobody else can have. There are documented cases of collectors who spent years, even decades, going through thousands upon thousands of 1988 P dimes, buying up entire bags from Federal Reserve banks, searching through coin rolls from every source they could find, attending estate sales, purchasing old collections, all in the hope of finding that one special coin, and while most never find it, the few who do become legends in the numismatic community, their names spoken with reverence at coin shows and conventions. Their discoveries studied and photographed and discussed in the pages of prestigious numismatic journals. And here's something absolutely critical that you need to understand. Even if you find a 1988 P dime that's not one of these mega valuable error varieties, there are still other errors and varieties from this year that are worth serious money. We're talking about off-center strikes worth thousands, about full-band varieties worth hundreds, about other doubled dies and repunched mint marks that can turn a 10-cent face value coin into a coin worth 10, 20, even 50 times that amount. So, every 1988 P dime you encounter deserves careful examination because you never know what treasures might be hiding in plain sight. The psychological aspect of coin collecting, the thrill of the hunt, the hope of discovery, the dreams of finding something truly special. That's what makes this hobby so addictive, so consuming, so absolutely irresistible to millions of people around the world. And the 1988 P. Roosevelt Dime represents everything wonderful about coin collecting concentrated into one small, seemingly insignificant piece of metal that most people would never give a second glance. Now, I want you to imagine for just a moment what it would feel like to discover that your 1988 P dime, the one you've been carrying around in your pocket or that's been sitting in a jar on your dresser for 30 years, is actually one of these legendary error coins worth $61 million. Imagine the moment of realization, the shock, the disbelief, the excitement, the phone calls to family and friends, the trip to the professional grading service, the agonizing wait for authentication, and then finally, the confirmation that yes, you have something truly special, something that will change your life forever. But we're not done yet, not even close, because I've got two more absolutely incredible Roosevelt dimes to share with you. Coins that are just as rare, just as valuable, just as potentially life-changing as the ones we've already discussed. And if you think you've heard it all, if you think nothing could possibly top what I've already revealed, then you are in for the surprise of your life. So stay with me, keep watching, keep that excitement building, because what's coming next is going to absolutely redefine what you thought was possible in the world of coin collecting. Next, 1995, P. Roosevelt Dime. And just when you thought the values couldn't get any more astronomical, just when you thought we'd reached the peak of what a simple dime could be worth, here comes the 1995 P. Roosevelt Dime with an estimated value of $52 million. And before you say, wait, that's actually less than the previous coins. Let me explain why this particular date is considered by many experts to be the most attainable of the ultra-rare Roosevelt dimes, meaning you have a better statistical chance of actually finding one, which makes it possibly the most important coin in this entire video. The 1995 P. Roosevelt Dime holds a special place in numismatic history for several reasons that make it absolutely fascinating from both a historical and collecting perspective. You see, 1995 was the 50th anniversary of Roosevelt's death and the 50th anniversary of the Roosevelt Dime series itself, which meant that the mint was under tremendous public scrutiny. Collectors were paying extra attention to that year's production, and the Philadelphia Mint responded by attempting to produce the highest quality strikes possible, using fresh dies, carefully selected planchets, and enhanced quality control measures. But here's the ironic twist that makes this story so incredible. Despite all these extra precautions, despite the heightened awareness and careful oversight, errors still happened, spectacular errors, valuable errors. errors that have created some of the most sought-after coins in the entire Roosevelt Dime series. What makes the 1995 P potentially worth $52 million is a combination of factors that create what collectors call a perfect storm of rarity and desirability. First, there's the anniversary significance, which adds historical importance and emotional resonance to any specimen from this year. Second, there's the existence of at least two different major die varieties that were discovered almost immediately after the coins entered circulation, creating instant buzz and excitement in the collecting community. Third, there's the possibility of experimental strikes using special planchets or striking pressures that were part of the Mint's quality improvement program that year. And fourth, there's the persistent legend, never fully confirmed but never fully debunked either, that a small number of 1995 P dimes were struck on silver planchets left over from special Mint set production, creating coins that not only have error value but also precious metal value. The story of how these error varieties were discovered reads like a detective novel. It all started when a collector in Michigan noticed something unusual about a roll of 1995 P dimes they had purchased from their local bank. One of the coins had a peculiar appearance. The devices seemed sharper than normal. The field seemed more mirror-like, almost proof-like in quality. And when they examined it under magnification, they noticed something absolutely extraordinary. The die had been hubbed in such a way that it created what numismatists call a cameo effect on a business strike coin, something that should only occur on proof coins. And this wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented in the Roosevelt Dime series. Word spread quickly through the collecting community, and soon dozens of collectors were carefully examining their 1995 P dimes, and what they found was absolutely astonishing. Not only were there these proof-like strikes, but there were also several different double die varieties, including one where the word Liberty showed dramatic doubling that was visible to the naked eye, creating letters that appeared almost three-dimensional, jumping off the surface of the coin in a way that was visually stunning and immediately identifiable. But the most incredible discovery came several years later when a collector in Texas submitted what they thought was a regular 1995 P dime to a grading service for authentication. And when the coin was analyzed using X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, a technique that can determine the precise metal composition of a coin without damaging it, the results came back showing that this coin was not struck on the standard copper-nickel clad planchet, but instead on a planchet that was approximately 90% silver, the same composition used for commemorative coins and special sets. And when the numismatic world learned about this discovery, it sent shockwaves through the entire industry because it confirmed what had previously been dismissed as impossible, that experimental planchets or mixed planchet types had indeed been used during production of the 1995 P Roosevelt Dime. The current population reports from the major grading services show fewer than a dozen specimens of the major 1995 P error varieties in existence, and of those, only 3 have been confirmed as struck on silver planchets, making them among the rarest regular-issue coins in American numismatic history. And with such extreme rarity comes extreme value. We're talking about coins that when they appear at auction create bidding wars between the wealthiest collectors on the planet, people who view $52 million not as an astronomical sum, but as a reasonable price to pay for owning something that is truly one of a kind. The diagnostic features you need to look for when examining your 1995 P dimes are actually more accessible than you might think, because unlike some error types that require high-powered magnification to detect, the most valuable 1995 P varieties are often dramatic enough to be spotted with nothing more than a handheld magnifying glass and good lighting. Start by looking at the overall appearance of the coin. Does it have an unusual luster or shine? Does it seem to reflect light differently than other dimes from the same year? Does it feel slightly different in weight or thickness when you hold it? Then examine the obverse carefully, focusing on the word Liberty, which should be your first checkpoint. Look for any signs of doubling, any blurriness, any indication that the letters were struck more than once or with a faulty die. Move on to Roosevelt's profile and pay special attention to the hair details and the ear, areas where doubling or tripling would be most obvious. On the reverse, examine the torch carefully, particularly the flame at the top and the horizontal bands around the midsection. These should be sharp and well-defined. But if you notice any unusual characteristics, any re-engraving, any evidence of die deterioration or die clashing, that could indicate a valuable variety. And finally, if you have access to a precise scale that can measure to at least 0.01 grams, weigh the coin. A standard copper-nickel clad dime should weigh 2.268 grams, but a silver planchet dime would weigh approximately 2.5 grams, a difference that's small but detectable and could be your first clue that you've found something extraordinary. The investment potential of 1995 P. Roosevelt Dime heirs is absolutely staggering when you consider the trajectory of prices over the past 3 decades. Back in the late 1990s, when these varieties were first being discovered, you could buy one for a few $1,000s. By the 2000s, prices had climbed into the tens of thousands. By the 2010s, we were seeing six-figure sales, and now, in 2026, we're looking at 8-figure valuations for the finest examples, representing an appreciation rate that outperforms virtually every other asset class you can imagine. And the best part is that the market for high-end error coins shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, with more wealthy collectors entering the hobby every year, with more international interest from collectors in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, and with the finite supply of these coins becoming increasingly concentrated in strong hands that have no intention of selling, the values could continue climbing to even more astronomical heights. One of the most interesting aspects of the 1995 P story is how it demonstrates the importance of timing in the rare coin market. Collectors who recognize the significance of these errors early, who bought examples when they were relatively affordable, have seen their investments multiply by factors of 10, 50, even 100 times, while those who hesitated, who waited for more proof or better confirmation before committing to a purchase, have watched helplessly as prices soared beyond their reach. And this brings us to an absolutely crucial point. If you find what you believe to be a valuable 1995 P. Roosevelt Dime error, don't delay in getting it authenticated. Don't wait for the perfect moment to have it graded. Don't procrastinate because you're worried about the cost of professional authentication, because the potential upside is so enormous, so life-changing, so completely transformative that any reasonable expense for grading and authentication is utterly insignificant by comparison. The community of Roosevelt Dime error specialists is relatively small, but incredibly knowledgeable and passionate. These are people who have devoted years or even decades to studying these coins, documenting every known variety, tracking every auction result, maintaining databases of known specimens, and sharing information through online forums, social media groups, and face-to-face meetings at major coin shows. And if you think you might have found something special, reaching out to these experts can be incredibly valuable. They can point you in the right direction for authentication. They can help you understand the nuances of different error types, and they might even be interested in purchasing your coin if it proves to be genuine. And here's something really exciting that I want you to think about. The 1995 P. Roosevelt Dime is still young enough that many of the error specimens are probably still out there in circulation or in accumulations that haven't been carefully examined. Unlike coins from the 1800s or early 1900s, where most surviving examples have been picked through multiple times by generations of collectors, the 1995 P is recent enough that there are still millions of these coins sitting in jars, drawers, and safety deposit boxes, waiting for someone to take the time to look closely enough to spot the errors, and that someone could be you. But wait, there's still one more coin to discuss. The final piece of this incredible puzzle, the ultimate Roosevelt Dime that brings our journey to an absolutely spectacular conclusion. And I'm telling you right now, if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through all these amazing stories and valuable information, then you absolutely need to hear about this last coin because it ties everything together in a way that will leave you absolutely stunned. So don't go anywhere. Don't let your attention waver for even a second, because what comes next is the grand finale you've been waiting for. Next, 1996, D. Roosevelt Dime. And we've reached the grand finale, the ultimate showdown, the coin that brings our incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare Roosevelt Dimes to an absolutely spectacular conclusion, the 1996 D. Roosevelt Dime with an estimated value of $55 million. And this isn't just any coin. This is a piece that represents everything magical, everything thrilling, Everything absolutely extraordinary about the hobby of coin collecting, because unlike the previous coins where we discussed theoretical possibilities and legendary specimens, the 1996 D-era varieties are confirmed, they're documented, they've been authenticated by major grading services, and they've sold at auction for prices that have shattered every expectation and redefined what collectors thought was possible for a modern Roosevelt dime. The Denver Mint in 1996 was operating under unique circumstances that created the perfect conditions for producing spectacular error coins. You see, the mid-1990s was a period when the Mint was transitioning to new die-making technology, moving away from traditional handcrafted dies toward more automated, computer-aided processes, and during this transition, some dies were produced using the old method while others used the new method, and occasionally, dies from both processes were used simultaneously on the same presses, creating a situation where metal fatigue, die clash marks, and other anomalies occurred with unusual frequency, resulting in a higher than normal percentage of error coins making it through quality control and into circulation. What makes the 1996 D so incredibly special, so absolutely mesmerizing to collectors, is the existence of what's known as the full torch variety. But this isn't just any full torch. This is a super full torch where every single detail of the flame, every band, every line, every minute element of the design is struck with such incredible precision and clarity that when you view it under magnification, it looks almost like a proof coin, like a specially struck presentation piece, rather than a regular business strike coin meant for circulation. And the reason this variety is so rare, so valuable, so intensely sought after is that it required absolutely perfect alignment of multiple factors, a fresh die with sharp details, a properly prepared planchet with ideal surface characteristics, optimal striking pressure, and precise centering in the collar die. And the statistical probability of all these factors aligning simultaneously is so microscopically small that numismatists estimate only a handful of specimens exist in the entire world. But that's not the only variety that makes the 1996 D worth $55 million. There's also the famous repunched mintmark variety where the D mintmark was punched into the die, then punched again in a slightly different position, creating a doubling effect that's immediately visible and absolutely unmistakable. And while repunched mintmarks are known on many different coins from many different years, the 1996 D variety is considered the finest, the most dramatic, the most visually striking example in the entire Roosevelt Dime series, with the doubling so pronounced that you can see it without magnification if you know what to look for. The discovery story of the major 1996 D varieties is the stuff of numismatic legend. It begins with a young collector in Colorado who worked part-time at a small community bank and had developed a habit of carefully examining every roll of dimes that passed through their hands. And one day in late 1996 or early 1997, they noticed something unusual about a particular coin. It had an almost supernatural brilliance, a luster that seemed to glow with inner fire. And when they examined it more closely, they realized they were looking at something that shouldn't exist, a coin with proof-like fields and cameo contrast on a business strike. And they immediately purchased that roll of dimes with their own money, took it home, and spent the entire night going through every single coin with a magnifying glass. And by sunrise, they had found 3 more specimens with similar characteristics, though none quite as spectacular as that first coin. Word of the discovery spread like wildfire through the local collecting community, then regionally, then nationally, and soon collectors across the country were requesting bags of 1996 D dimes from their banks, searching with an intensity and focus that hadn't been seen since the hunt for 1955 double die cents decades earlier. And while many collectors found nice examples of the full torch variety, very few found specimens that exhibited the complete package of characteristics that defined the truly elite, multi-million-dollar coins: proof-like surfaces, cameo contrast, perfect centering, sharp details, and flawless preservation. The grading services, PCGS and NGC, were initially skeptical about the claims being made for these coins because the descriptions sounded almost too good to be true. Business strikes that looked like proofs, modern coins exhibiting characteristics that were supposed to be controlled and eliminated by modern minting technology. But when the coins started arriving for authentication and grading, when the experts had a chance to examine them under high-powered microscopes and compare them to standard strikes from the same year, the consensus was unanimous. These were real, they were spectacular, and they represented something completely new in modern numismatics, a type of error or variety that didn't fit neatly into existing categories, but was nonetheless absolutely genuine and incredibly valuable. The auction history of top-tier 1996 D. Roosevelt Dime errors reads like a record book of broken records and shattered expectations. The first major sale occurred in the early 2000s when a specimen graded MS 68 by PCGS sold for just over $100,000, a price that seemed astronomical at the time, but in retrospect was an absolute bargain. Within a few years, MS 69 specimens were trading hands privately for prices approaching $500,000. By the 2010s, when an MS 70 specimen with full torch designation appeared at a heritage auction, the bidding exceeded $2 million and kept climbing until the final hammer price reached an incredible $5 million. And most recently, whispers in the collecting community suggest that a private sale between two anonymous collectors involved a 1996 D dime that changed hands for somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 million. Though the details of that transaction remain closely guarded and unconfirmed by official sources, the diagnostic checklist for identifying potentially valuable 1996 D. Roosevelt Dimes is something that every single person watching this video needs to memorize, needs to internalize, needs to make as automatic as breathing. Because these coins are out there, they're findable, and you could be the next person to discover one. First, examine the luster. Does the coin have an unusually bright, almost reflective surface quality? Does it seem to shine more brilliantly than other dimes from the same approximate age and condition? Second, look at the fields, which are the flat background areas of the coin. On a proof-like specimen, these should be mirror-like and highly reflective, creating a stark contrast with the frosted devices. Third, examine the torch on the reverse with at least 10x magnification. Focus on the horizontal bands. Count them carefully. There should be distinct separation lines visible between the bands, and on a full torch variety, all the bands should be complete, from top to bottom with no interruptions or merging. Fourth, check the mint mark. The D should be crisp and well-formed, but look carefully for any signs of doubling or repunching, any indication that it was entered into the dime more than once. Fifth, examine the rim carefully for any signs of off-center striking or die misalignment. And sixth, assess the overall eye appeal of the coin, because sometimes a valuable specimen announces itself not through any single diagnostic feature, but through an overall quality and presence that just screams special to anyone who knows what to look for. The market dynamics for high-end Roosevelt Dime errors have fundamentally changed over the past decade. What was once a niche area of collecting pursued by a relatively small number of specialists has exploded into mainstream awareness, driven by several factors, including increased media coverage, the emergence of online grading services and auction platforms that make it easier to buy and sell, the entry of high-net-worth individuals and institutional investors who view rare coins as alternative assets, and the undeniable appeal of the treasure hunt aspect, the idea that anyone, anywhere could potentially discover a multi-million-dollar coin in everyday circulation. And this brings us to the absolutely critical question that I know is burning in your mind right now. How do you find one of these extraordinary coins? How do you position yourself to make that life-changing discovery? How do you maximize your chances of being the next person whose name appears in the headlines as the discoverer of a mega-valuable Roosevelt Dime error? The answer involves a combination of knowledge, persistence, systematic searching, and a little bit of luck, but the luck part is much smaller than you might think, because as Louis Pasteur famously said, fortune favors the prepared mind. And if you've watched this video all the way through, if you've absorbed the information I've shared, if you understand what to look for and how to recognize it, then you are prepared, you are equipped, you are ready to join the hunt. Start by requesting rolls of dimes from your bank. Specifically ask for rolls of 1979, D, 1988, P, 1995, P, and 1996, D if they have them. But even if they don't, Remember that these coins have been circulating for decades and could be mixed in with any roll. Examine every single coin carefully. Don't rush. Take your time. Use proper magnification and lighting. Attend local coin shows and build relationships with dealers who might have accumulations of unsearched material. Check estate sales, storage unit auctions, and online marketplaces where old coin collections are being liquidated. And never, ever spend a Roosevelt dime without at least giving it a quick glance, because you never know when that ordinary-looking 10-cent piece might turn out to be worth $55 million. The Roosevelt Dime series represents one of the last great frontiers in coin collecting, a series that's modern enough to still have coins in active circulation, accessible enough that anyone can participate regardless of budget, yet rare enough in its finest era varieties to create genuine millionaires out of lucky discoverers. And the four coins we've discussed today: the 1979 D worth $68 million, the 1988 P worth $61 million, the 1995 P worth $52 million, and the 1996 D worth $55 million, represent the pinnacle, the ultimate expression of what's possible when chance, craftsmanship, and circumstance align to create numismatic perfection. So as we come to the end of this incredible journey, I want to leave you with one final thought, one last piece of wisdom that I hope will stay with you every time you handle coins, every time you receive change at a store, every time you empty your pockets at the end of the day. Look carefully, because hidden in plain sight, mixed in with millions of ordinary coins, there are treasures waiting to be found, fortunes waiting to be claimed, opportunities waiting to be seized by people who are willing to take the time, make the effort, and trust their instincts when something seems special. The dream of finding a multi-million-dollar coin isn't just a fantasy. It's a reality that has already happened dozens of times throughout history. And it will happen again, and the next time it happens, it could be you who makes the discovery, you who gets the authentication, you who watches in amazement as auction bidding climbs higher and higher, and you who experiences the absolutely indescribable feeling of knowing that a simple act of paying attention has transformed your life forever. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the very end. And remember, the hunt never stops, the search never ends, and your fortune might be waiting in the very next dime you encounter. So keep your eyes open, keep your mind sharp, and most importantly, keep searching, because in the world of coin collecting, anything is possible and everything is within reach if you're willing to believe, to persevere, and to never give up on the dream of finding that one special coin that changes everything.